Friendship. Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
No, I am your father.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
You're listening to After the Ending, the only film podcast where we tell you what happens after the ending of your favorite films. And now, here are your hosts, Mike Spring and Phil Edwards.
Hello. See what I did there, Phil?
Spooky, spooky, spooky.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to After the Ending. It is our annual Halloween extravaganza, hence my spooky intro there. And as always, I am Mike Spring.
And I'm Phil Edwards.
And we are here to talk about movies and all the usual stuff. But of course, we have it's our Halloween theme. We like to do a Halloween episode every year. We like to go after the ending of a horror movie, do a themed top 5 list. And we got some good stuff for you tonight. Right, Phil?
We certainly have, and it's 6 at the time of recording. It's 6. Is it 6 days until Halloween?
That sounds accurate. Yeah, 6 days till Halloween.
6 more days till Halloween. Okay. Yes, it's spooky season, a time of witches, goblins, serial killers.
Of course, Phil's got to get a serial killer in there.
Lots and lots of horror movies. 2022 has been a pretty good year for horror movies so far. Some decent ones, well, quite a lot anyway.
Okay.
But, yeah, I'm going to be diving into some horror movies this evening.
Yes, we will. Do you want to tell them what we're diving into?
Yes, we're going to be going after the ending of Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which, as you'll probably know, doesn't feature Michael Myers. The original intention was for the Halloween films to be an anthology, so they'd be set at Halloween, but each one would be a little bit different. But we had 2 with Michael Myers, then Season of the Witch, and then they went, "Oh, people like Michael Myers."
Yeah.
And then the film went.
Well, now sort of. I mean,
bits and pieces were good.
I think there's some kind of like cult B movie love for Halloween's 4, 5, and 6. Like I enjoyed those movies, even though they're not great. 6 is especially the kind of the worst one, but 4 and 5 are actually like I find to be perfectly enjoyable slasher films. Michael Myers, like just doing what he does. You know, they're not high art. They don't reach the heights of the first 2 films, but like for just if you just want to have like I got my Halloween box set here, right? My super beautiful, gigantic Halloween Blu-ray box set.
Ooh, wow, that's nice.
Yeah, I love this, and it's got every movie. And I like to watch all 8 of them in a row, and then we just pretend the Rob Zombie ones never happened. Especially because they're it's like there's only 3 Indiana Jones movies, right? There was 8 Halloween movies, and then the new trilogy, and that's it.
Yeah,
but yeah. I do like to revisit Halloween 4 and 5 and 6, even though they just slow me down before I get to Halloween H2O, which is of course a masterpiece.
Yeah, and I think sometimes those cheesy ones like 4, 5, and 6, and in other slasher movies and stuff, you always get those lousy ones, but the ones which aren't as good as the classic ones, but they're still good to throw on during this time of year. You know, especially having a few drinks. But if you're just watching, sometimes you want a really good bad horror film.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah. I don't need all my horror films. What's the term? I saw a quote from John Carpenter. Maybe it was you that shared this. I don't know. It was like an interview quote, and somebody was asking John Carpenter what he thinks about elevated horror. Which is the term they've come up with for all the movies I hate, like The Witch and what's the one? You know the one I'm talking about. The one with the girl, the little girl. It's got the name, the 1-word name. What's it called?
Annabelle.
You know.
No.
The Come on now. My wife is blending, by the way, if you guys hear that in the background.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. It was one of the Ari Aster films. You know, it's the guy.
Hereditary.
Hereditary, right. And like Hereditary and Midsummer and all those, they call them, that's the word they've come up with apparently, elevated horror, which I seriously throw some shade at, and I question that. But they explained to him what it was, and John Carpenter's response was, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And I was like, yes, thank you, because I do not like those movies. So like I think they're just terrible. I mean, like I would rather have a bad slasher flick kind of thing than some of these quote elevated horror movies any day of the week. I'll watch Halloween 6 800 more times before I watch Midsummer or Hereditary again. I can tell you that.
I know what you mean, but I think lots of these films, it depends what mood you're in, but sometimes the marketing on some of these films, you say it's a horror film, and then you watch it and you're going, no, it's a real dark drama, or it's a dark thriller, things like this. But there's lots of, but that elevated horror, yeah, that got on my nerves a little bit. But
yeah, I mean, it is mood dependent. Like if you're in the mood to enjoy what you're watching, or to see a good movie, then yeah, that probably isn't the right way to go. But if you're in the mood for something that's like pretentious and horrible and boring that you only like because other people tell you should like it, then by all means, elevated horror is absolutely the way to go. So
yeah, but it's
you like the way I'm pulling my punches tonight, Phil?
Oh, I really do. But yeah, it's I do like a good horror film, and I do like a good bad horror film.
Yeah, exactly.
There's just sometimes, I mean, and Halloween 3: Season of the Witch has been one of those films. I think when it first came out, because it was so different to the other Halloween films, it got a lot of flack. But I think over the years, it's become a cult classic, and then maybe even almost a mainstream classic, maybe.
I don't know if I go that far, but definitely a cult classic. I think a lot of people,
more fans, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people come around to the fact that, if you're a fan of the Halloween movies, you recognize that Halloween 3 is a really good, fun horror movie on its own right that just doesn't fit into the rest of the Michael Myers, franchise. And I wish it had a different name, and it was just its own movie, Season of the Witch, like that would just be this fun little cult classic horror movie. But yeah, I mean, I think most people recognize it. You still hear people are like, oh, Halloween 3 is terrible. I'm like, it's actually not. I think a lot of us have recognized now it's a really good film. But if you're, and I'm listen, and I get it because I'm a huge Michael Myers fan. Like, he's my favorite of the slashers. Halloween is my favorite horror movie. Like, I will watch all the Michael Myers movies. I've seen them all multiple times. So I always want Michael Myers, right? So it's easy. Yeah. I understand why people dismiss it out of hand, but I think when you watch it, you're like, hey, this is a really fun film, although slightly out there. But we'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, for anybody who's wondering, again, as I think we made clear, though, Halloween 3 is a standalone story. So we thought, hey, we can do an after the ending for it because it doesn't tie in to any of the other Michael Myers continuity at all because he's not in the film. So it's a standalone, so we can do an after the ending for it.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to be doing. As always, if you're watching this live on YouTube or Facebook, you can leave comments on where you're watching it. We'll be able to see them, so you can join the conversation, the discussion. You can say we're idiots for liking this, or you can agree with us, or whatever. You can say what the best Halloween film, apart from the first one, is to you. And as well as doing Halloween 3, and after the ending of that one, we're going to be talking about our top 5 favorite vampire films.
Yes.
Movies which feature predominantly vampires. Oh, well, we'll get into that anymore, but vampire movies, top 5.
Yep.
And then also our usual after the ending recommendations once we've covered those other 2 bits.
Exactly. So yes, jam-packed episode, Halloween themed. It should be lots of fun. So let's get into things then, shall we? It is time to go after the ending of Halloween 3. So before I do my recap and we get into our endings, well, I guess we kind of talked about it already, but Phil, how do you feel about Halloween 3? I know I said what I think about it. What do you think about it?
I've always liked it, to be honest. I mean, I know it was different from the other ones. I'm not sure. I can't remember the first time I saw it, but I think I might have seen Halloween 3 before I saw the original Halloween. So I think that might be a better way. Maybe that's why I like it more. Well, I don't like it more than the original, but that's why I enjoy it, because I had no preconceptions going into it. But I like the idea of it. The fact, the masks were really good design, but kids wearing masks at Halloween, and then bad things can happen to them because of it. It was really good. The whole the little jingle on the adverts, like "Go and Gone," was always, a little earworm which gets in your head.
Yep.
It was also nice because back in the day when this came out over in the UK, here in England, Halloween, we celebrated it, but it was never as big a deal as it was over in America. All the trick and treating thing. Over the years, that's changed and it's become a bigger thing. But back then, I always quite liked it when I was a kid, seeing what was going on in America with regards to Halloween, because it looked like a lot of fun. Over here, we just carved faces and turnips, which is so hard compared to pumpkins. Yeah. We didn't do the trick or treating, but we did like duck apples, where we have apples in a bowl. You got to get them without using your hands.
Yeah.
All those kind of things. But it was a nice little insight into Halloween, but also creepy and yeah, I like it. And it also had some a good little cast of Tom Atkins, Dan O'Hurley here in the right. But I enjoy it. I've always enjoyed it.
That's good. Yeah, I do too. I thought I think one of the things I liked with the current trilogy, which I have mixed feelings about, but Halloween Kills, the second one, which I think is my favorite of the three, I did like
Evil dies tonight.
yeah, aside from that part. What I liked was all the nods to the original, and they had even the nods to Halloween 3 by having the masks. The kids. I think those kids in the masks were just the masks themselves, but they were definitely the masks from Halloween 3, which I enjoyed seeing those as a little tribute, kind of saying like, hey, we love this film too.
Yeah, that was good. I like that. I've enjoyed this the new Halloween trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I like it overall. It goes like this for me a little bit. There's things I like about it. There's things I don't like about it. I like Kills a lot Kills, the second one, because they brought in a lot of the characters from the original story. You know what I mean? And especially since they erased continuity of every film but the first one. I thought that was cool, and even brought back some of the original actors. I thought that was really neat. So that was the one I liked the most of them. But I mean, I don't hate any of them. I don't love any of them. Like, none of them, get me super excited, but I don't dislike them either. So they're cool enough.
Yeah. We could probably do a whole episode discussing that, but
yeah, exactly. I mean, listen, I can easily do a whole episode discussing my feelings on the entire Halloween franchise. I don't like to call myself an expert, because I feel like experts are the people who can tell you like the names of the credits and everybody, and all the behind the scenes stuff, how the films are made. And I'm not that, but like, I definitely have seen them all enough times to have strong opinions about each and every film in the franchise. So anytime you want to do that, you let me know.
We could do that. We should do some. We might do some after the ending specials where we just
that's a good idea. Yeah,
like
a themed episode where we just do a deep dive into something, and then we can also do a deep dive into every film in the Fast and Furious franchise.
So anyway, let's do Halloween.
You love that.
No, I'd be up for doing that actually, because it's. I haven't seen a couple of them.
Well, I was going to say, if we do that, you'd have to rewatch them all, and then you might actually discover how great they really are. And so I don't know if you're willing to put yourself, if you're willing to open yourself up to that.
That could be worth doing, but does that mean we'd have to discuss the whole thing by going, family? Yeah.
Have you seen the new Shazam trailer?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
The new Shazam trailer has a nice nod to the Fast and Furious. Yeah, I thought that was great.
Yeah.
All right. Enough dilly-dallying, then let's get into our endings. I feel like I went first last time, but maybe I didn't. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. You do the intro, then I'll go first.
Okay, I'll do the intro, then you go first. All right, here we go. So, 1982's Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, written and directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, who was very involved in the first two films, starring Tom Atkins, Stacey Nelkin, and Dan O'Herlihy. So, here's the story. After a series of mysterious events, a woman named Ellie ends up with a man named Dan investigating Silver Shamrock Novelties, a company in Santa Mira, California, who have a line of Halloween masks for kids coming out. And there's these ever-present TV commercials playing this jingle that you kind of hummed for us a little bit earlier, that you hear constantly throughout the film. They investigate the Shamrock factory, and meanwhile, we learn that the masks have microchips in them, but we don't know what they do just yet. We also learn that several of the Shamrock factory workers are androids, and Ellie gets captured. Dan is eventually captured as well by the Shamrock goons and meets Connell Cochran, who reveals that the masks he's the head of Shamrock. The masks each have a microchip in them with a fragment of a Stonehenge rock. We weren't expecting that. And on Halloween, when the mask wearers watch the big giveaway commercial that promises a huge prize, the masks will kill all of them, causing snakes and insects to erupt from their bodies, causing mass havoc and killing lots of people. Definitely where the film takes a bit of a weird turn. It turns out that Cochran wants to resurrect the ancient Samhain rituals and use cult means to gain power by sacrificing children. That's not cool. Dan and Ellie manage to start a chain reaction of events that kills Cochran and destroys the factory and the android workers in it, and they escape. But then Dan is attacked by Ellie, who it turns out is a robot duplicate of the original Ellie. Dan manages to defeat her and runs to a gas station, frantically calling the TV stations to prevent the commercial from being shown. But as he's frantically pleading them to stop, one last station airs the commercial anyway. And that is how the film ends. Kind of a nice little twist ending. Yeah. What do you think, Phil? Did I do it justice? It's a surprising amount to try and, put into a small section there.
That's. I think you mentioned the Stonehenge.
Yep.
Pagan ritual that come out of left field. I always feel the androids come out of left field, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, they're definitely a little bit strange for sure. It's
Yeah.
it is a weird film. I mean, to say the least. It sounds it sounds weirder when you boil it down to like one or two paragraphs. It makes some semblance of more sense when you're watching it. Like it's not like, oh, this film is steeped in logic and reality, but at least it coherently like
Yeah.
blends together, and you watch it and you sort of just go along with it. Like, yeah, it makes sense. Why not? Why not have robot workers in the
Yeah.
Shamrock Factory?
Well, Dan O'Hurley, he went on to do RoboCop, so there we go.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, let's hear your after the ending then, Phil. What do you got?
Okay, it had been a few years since the incident. Hundreds of kids, well, hundreds of innocents, we'll say, had died before the advert had been stopped. Without Cochrane being alive to complete the ritual, the dark energy had been unleashed with no direction. It gathered in the places that already had a strange, twisted reputation. Castle Rock, Harrow County, Twin Peaks, Arkham, Haddonfield, Crystal Lake, and so on. Nice. There, those with dark souls found themselves gifted with strength, longevity, and incredible regeneration, and they continued their stabby. Yeah. Doorways that should have remained closed were open just long enough for strange creatures to enter our world. True evil grew stronger as the nights got darker. Yet Dr. Dan Chalice never gave up. He'd been tempted to fall back into the bottle, but he had an epiphany. He was the only person who knew the cause of the horrors plaguing mankind, so we had to find a way to stop it. He traveled around making contacts. A young girl who slayed vampires, an FBI agent who focused on spooky cases, a foul-mouthed, one-handed drunk who'd had a bad experience in a cabin, and a hunter from Lawrence, Kansas, and his two young boys. They were just the beginning. It would take time, but Dr. Chalice had faith they would push the darkness back. Meanwhile, an ancient mask that Cochrane had been studying had been lost when the Silver Shamrock factory had been closed. It had been discovered, passed around, and lost once again, and had then been found by a young bank clerk called Stanley Ipkiss, who was deciding whether to put it on. That's where we bring it to a close.
I love it. I love it. That's fantastic. Great. A lot of fun references in there. I'm not going to explain them to everybody, all of them to everybody, but just in case anyone didn't catch the last one, because that is sort of the one that ties it all together. Stanley Ipkiss, of course, would be Jim Carrey's character from The Mask. So I love the idea of tying in this special mask, and it fits right in, right? It could be a pagan thing, Clearly, we know from the Mask movie it has some sort of dark energy around it. So I like that.
Thank you very much.
Very well done. Very well done.
I enjoyed writing that one, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine. That was fun. Very fun. All right. Well, I didn't go quite so clever, but I think I came up with something interesting.
Okay, hit me with it.
All right, here we go. So mine picks up literally right after as the movie's ending. Dan breaks down sobbing when he realizes the last station aired the commercial, horrified by the thousands of kids who will be violently killed. But in a twist of fate that could only happen in a contrived fictional ending, the president of the United States decided to have a live press conference just moments before the commercial aired. While the station had the commercial ready to broadcast, it was completely superseded by the president taking over all the major networks, and the commercial never actually made it to anyone's television screens.
Oh, brilliant.
Thank you. I don't think it works that way in real, like I don't, but whatever. It works in my ending.
Yeah.
When Dan realizes what happened, he makes his way to the TV station, and rather than wasting time explaining, he simply steals the master tape that contained the commercial. He heads to the other two TV stations and does the same thing to ensure that the commercial can never air again. After a couple of days to recuperate from the strange events, he heads back into Santa Mira. Dan is sure that Ellie was killed when Cochrane replaced her with a robot, but he's determined to find either her or her body so she can be laid to rest or rescued. After searching the town to no avail, he finally checks into the same motel he stayed at when they first got to town to rest for the night. To his shock, Ellie is manning the front desk, but she has no memory of Dan or the events at Shamrock. Dan is at first convinced that she's another robot, but after witnessing her cut herself accidentally with a letter opener, he realizes she's just been brainwashed. He figures if Cochrane could create android servants and killer death masks, brainwashing somebody was probably a piece of cake. With the help of the authorities, Dan is able to rescue Ellie and get her into psychiatric care to help restore her memories. He calls on an old friend, an esteemed psychologist named Dr. Sam Loomis. It takes several months, but eventually Dr. Loomis is able to restore Ellie's memories, and she and Dan begin a new life together, leaving all of the horror of the season of the witch behind them. They decide to start over fresh, so they find a nice little family home that's available surprisingly cheap in a pleasant little town called Haddonfield. And that's the end.
I like it. I like it.
Thanks. Yeah, I had a little fun with that.
You see, that's the thing. They could have done the anthology thing, have a new film set at Halloween, but have little references or attachments to them all.
Right.
You know, have a character like Dr. Loomis could be attached to different people. A shop or the Silver Shamrock Factory could be mentioned in some of the things. It could have worked if they'd been popular. If Halloween 3 had worked, it could have had legs, and it could have been an ongoing thing. We had a new Halloween film every couple of years.
Yep.
Unrelated, could have been jumping off points. And then hell, you could do it where you do the Marvel thing, where and then every 5 or 6 films, they suddenly seem to come together.
Right. That could have been cool, but it wasn't meant to be. And then it would have robbed me of all my favorite Michael Myers movies. So
yeah,
I'm
true.
okay with it.
Swings and roundabouts and chainsaws and things like that.
There you go.
Good though, I liked the end. It was nice. Good.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So there you go. So that is our endings for Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. And that will move us along nicely then into our top 5 list. As we like to do our top 5s. And this one, as you mentioned, Phil, is our top 5 vampire movies, which was surprisingly difficult.
Yes, because it turns out there's an awful lot of films which feature vampires in a big way.
Here's what I found. So I'll take you through my journey with this. Here's what I found. I like vampires. I like vampires a lot. And there are a lot of vampire movies. And what I found is there's not a ton of vampire movies that I love. There's a lot of them that I've seen, and there's not a ton of them that I really enjoy. But here's what made it difficult, though, was I found was when I narrowed it down to like the 10 or so that I do love, then I had a really hard time picking between those because I love them all pretty equally. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I sifted through hundreds of vampire films and found a decent chunk that I really, really like, and that was work on its own. But then all of a sudden it was like, okay, but now how do I differentiate between these? Which ones go ahead of which ones? How do I determine which ones to leave off? That was challenging for me. Yeah,
it was a tough one. My list as well. They're all very close. But I was changing the order around a bit just before we started as well. So I know it's top 5.
Right.
It's all sort of like that. But also as well, it's as with all these lists, it's our personal favorites. I mean, some of you will go out there will be going, yes, but they're not the best vampire films, and I'm sure you're right. I mean, there are some brilliant vampire films, but as Mike said, some of them are brilliant, but I don't particularly enjoy them.
Right.
So these are our top 5 favorite films.
Yes.
Featuring vampires, and we also said we went with vampires have to be the main monster, so not things like Monster Squad won't be included.
Right. Yeah. That was one. So if anybody we'll just get out of the way. If anybody's like waiting for us to talk about Monster Squad, because if you're a longtime listener to the show, we love Monster Squad. We bring it up fairly often. I made the decision early on that I wasn't going to include it because even though it has Dracula in it, it's not a vampire movie. You know what I mean? It's really a movie about a group of kids and monsters that they're hunting. And so it just didn't fit to me the vein. See what I did there? The vein of the other films. So I just let Phil know that in case he wanted to. But I told, as we always, I wouldn't like to know each other's lists ahead of time. So I said, you do what you want to do, but that's what I'm using as my criteria. And I think you agreed. So we decided to leave that or other films like that off. Try to stick with movies that are really vampire focused. And I know for a fact, Phil, I know there's 2 movies on your list that are not. I know I don't know your list. I know because I know you. 2 movies that when I was looking at all the list that kept coming up, and I was like, okay, I know you like these movies a lot, and I'm pretty sure they're going to be on your top 5. And there's one of them I think might even be your number 1. We'll see how well I know you tonight. But if both of these films aren't on your list, I'll be very, very surprised. But that means, because they're not on my list, that means that we will definitely have some differences on our list. I'll be curious to see if we have any overlap. Actually, I think my prediction is we'll have 2 films that overlap and the others will be different. Okay. At least one film I know will be overlapped. I'm pretty sure. Okay. Although you could surprise me because you're weird like that. I don't know. We'll see. Definitely, you're going to have some differences tonight because I know there's going to be some on yours that will not be on mine. So
yeah, my first film's Monster Squad. Oh, no.
Okay. So I guess I'll kick things off.
Yes. So this is our top 5 favorite vampire films.
All right. Go. So my number 5 then, I was really tempted to put Twilight in here because because I like Twilight.
Yes, I know you do.
And I like to give it some love because I think it's a good film and I enjoy it. But ultimately, when I was coming down to my favorites, I got left off not because it's Twilight and I was worried what people would say, because I don't care what people say because I like Twilight. But it just wasn't better than any of my top 5 films, so it didn't quite make my list. But it gets an honorable mention because I do enjoy it. But my number 5 is actually a tie. And the reason I picked these two movies to tie here is because they are both sort of lesser known vampire films. One was like a full on indie. One was a theatrical release that came and went so quickly that most people probably don't even remember it. And I think I have the year wrong for it. I'm going to double check it real quick. So I'm just going to delay this even more to keep you guys in suspense while I double check my my numbers here. I had it. Okay, I was right. I was right that I was wrong. So my number 5 is a tie between Stakeland from 2010 and Daybreakers from 2009. So right in that same area.
Yeah, I'd forgotten all about Stakeland. That's a brilliant film.
Stakeland is really, really good. It is not a widely seen film. It does not have a lot of well-known people in it, but it is by Jim Mickle, who has gone on to be quite successful. He made some other really good movies, all kind of gritty, dark films, and now he was one of the showrunners on the Sweet Tooth TV show on Netflix, and it's kind of in a sort of post-apocalyptic, like post-vampire apocalypse world, and it's like just pockets of human survivors in a world that's sort of been taken over by vampires, but in a very desolate way. Like, just it's kind of everything is run down and dark, and there's not much hope, but it's a really, really good film. And then Daybreakers is kind of a similar thing, but in a more of a big scale science fiction almost way, where vampires have taken over the world again, but in this case they are like running the world, like running the government, and people are sort of like being used as like food, and there are people out there who are free still, but they're trying to find like a cure for vampirism and stuff like that. It's got Ethan Hawke in it, and I always felt like it was a really underrated vampire movie that just didn't get much attention when it came out in theaters. I know you're a fan of it as well, Phil. I don't know if it'll make your list or not, but both of them are, to me, I put them as a tie because they're both really underrated vampire movies that if you're looking for like a Halloween or vampire movie to watch and you haven't seen them, or these are the ones on my list that you probably haven't seen, the rest of my bet most people have seen, these are ones that are worth tracking down because they're both really, really good.
Yeah, I'd totally agree. Daybreakers almost made my list.
Yeah.
I think I like the concept a lot more than the execution, but I still enjoyed it.
Right.
The whole idea of it's like vampires have taken over already. That's how it goes in. That was brilliant. But Stakeland, I totally forgot about that one.
Yeah.
But I really like that one.
I do too. It's such a good, well done film. It's one of those ones that takes you by surprise. Like,
I
remember I got it to review and I was kind of like, all right, it's like an indie, but it's, it's an indie, but not like indie, like, with like a 12-cent budget type of thing. Like it was like a real film made, on sort of like an independent label, like the indies you've heard of, right? So not an A-list movie, but not like a Z, list either. It's like, it's in that realm of where it got some distribution and stuff like that. But I remember popping it in, like, this looks interesting, and then just being blown away by the story, the characters, the action, the stakes, the surprises, the twists and turns in it and everything. I really enjoyed it. Now I want to watch it again.
Yeah, me too, because it's been a while since but I'm glad they both made your list, and it's definitely check them out if you've not seen either of them, because they're well worth watching. Okay, well, my number 5, it's a double whammy as well. It's
look at that. We're both just cheaters, is what it boils down to.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It was so close. So I was going, well, no, they're going to have to be there. One of them is from 1983, and one of them is from 1993.
Okay.
1983 is The Hunger, directed by Tony Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Starring Catherine Deneuve, David Bowie, and Susan Sarandon. And it's all to do with Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie's are two vampires who've been going around draining people in nightclubs, drinking their blood, living for a long, long time. And then suddenly David Bowie's character starts aging rapidly. Knows that's not right. He tries to figure out what's going on, which brings in Susan Sarandon's character, who's a doctor, I think. And she gets involved. It gets a bit hot and steamy in places, so it's a bit racy. But then I always felt it was a good way of showing vampires, the lifestyle of a vampire and what they do and how they go about things. It's a romantic story. It's a horror story. It's shot really well. It's Tony Scott. It's a little bit different from some of his other ones, but I always like that one. And the other one that's at number 5 is Kronos by Guillermo del Toro, which is it's a different kind of vampire one. It's about an old man, a clock maker, I think, who finds this mechanical scarab, which he winds up, and then it sort of needle comes out into him and it turns him into a vampire. He needs blood to survive, and it's all Guillermo del Toro's before he became Guillermo del Toro, I suppose. But it's all
that's his first film.
Yeah, it's very stylish. Some great performances. It's got Ron Perlman in, so yeah, it's Guillermo del Toro. But yeah. I always like that one. It's because I remember watching Kronos and had no idea what it was about, and just put it on and go, what the heck's this? And it was all weird. Small little film, some great performances, but they're both my number 5, Kronos and The Hunger.
There you go. See, now I promised people listening and or watching that we would have differences in our list. And look, we're only 2 entries in. We already have 4 films that are different. But Kronos didn't make my list. I like Kronos because I'm a big Guillermo del Toro fan. It's not one of my favorite movies of his. I like it. I don't love it, but I enjoy it. And then actually, I've never seen The Hunger, believe it or not. And I really want to, because it is Tony Scott, who's one of my favorite directors. It's just one of those ones I've never gotten around to. So I definitely want to. And when I was going through looking at this list, I was like, ooh, I wonder if that would make my list if I'd seen it, because I love Tony Scott, but I just haven't. So I'll have to wait, and maybe I'll update once I've seen it.
It's definitely worth checking out. It's weird this year. I've been seeing a little bit more mentions of that particular film. I'm not sure why.
Yeah,
but,
maybe it's
where it is.
It's getting some reconsideration, you know?
Yeah.
All right. Good choices. So my number 4 then is from 1998, excuse me, and it is the movie that started off the entire Marvel universe, Blade. Which isn't really, but it sort of is the movie that started the Marvel universe. But it's the first Blade movie, and you can make an argument for the second one. I know, because again, it's Del Toro also, and I do enjoy the second one. But there is sort of a simplicity to the first film that I really enjoy. You know, it's Wesley Snipes against just regular old vampires. Like, there's none of the like scaly faced, you know, stuff going on and things like that, and it's just a really good origin story. You know, Stephen Dorff, who I love as an actor, is great as Deacon Frost. Just the look of the film is really great. You know, it's R-rated, so it's really, you know, it doesn't pull any punches. It just feels like a vampire movie, and it just gets everything right. And Wesley Snipes is so badass in it. Like, he's so great as Blade, and I just, like I said, I enjoy all 3 of them, honestly, and I really do like the second one. But for me, the first one is the clear favorite in terms of the films themselves. I just really like it the most. So Blade is my number 4 from 1998.
Well, my number 4 is also Blade.
Wow, really? Okay.
Yeah, so
that's one of the ones I thought might end up on your list, actually.
Yeah, it's all the same reason you said. It's stylish. I mean, the opening scene, at that big fight scene in the nightclub with all the blood pouring down. And we just get to see Blade just kick ass. What a great introduction to a character that was. Yeah. We got Chris Christopherson as Whistler. As I said, it's all the technology, the idea behind it, the vampire society, the way you've got the huge one who's like dealing with all the online stuff as well. The only thing which lets it down nowadays is some of the CG, but that's just purely of its time and things like that. Yeah. And even then, you don't mind it so much.
Well, and luckily it's not a movie that was overly dependent on CGI. Like it's not a film that's like takes place in space with aliens and spaceships and stuff like that. So it's you know, it's not over prevalent in the film, you know. So, but yeah, I agree that opening scene is great. I do feel like it's one of the more kind of complex vampire movies in a way, in that a lot of vampire movies are like, okay, there's a vampire and it's killing people and we got to stop it, you know, or it's like a bunch of vampires like reading Shakespearean soliloquies to each other about their boredom of life. And this is one where it's like you said, like the vampire society and the way it works, and like the, you know, Blade's reasons for killing them and how they operate, and you know, how they
and everything, you know, that stuff. I like all that.
Yeah, it's just a very complete sort of look at you know, vampire life. So but housed in this sort of superhero, you know, approach, which I like a lot.
So there you go. That was my number 4 as well as you. So
so we had a double whammy early on. That's cool. Or a bingo. I think that's a bingo, right?
That's a bingo. Yeah, it's a bingo.
Sorry. Okay, well, now I don't know. Maybe we'll have some similarities then. Well, I think that was one of the 2 that I thought you'd have on your list for sure. But there's maybe 3. I don't know. We'll see. Still waiting though. I know you've got a couple that are gonna end up on the list. I hope they do because I can only remember one of them right now. So I'm like, if they're not on there and you ask me what they are later, I'm gonna feel really dumb because I can only remember one of them. So we'll see what happens. Okay, my number 3 then is one of my favorites, and it's half a vampire movie. What I mean by that is it is 1996's From Dusk Till Dawn, starring George
Oh yes, for half a movie, yeah.
and
Yeah,
Quentin Tarantino. And the reason I say it's half a vampire movie is because the first half of the film is a heist movie or a escaped convict movie that has no vampires in it whatsoever. But as you know, if you've seen the film, once you get to the second half of the movie, it is all vampires all day long, and it is utterly glorious. It's Quentin Tarantino scripting and Robert Rodriguez directed. No,
You think so? I've gone blank now.
I think that was the movie that made me a fan. It's got that great dialogue. It's got the, just the over the topness that Rodriguez and Tarantino bring to the proceedings. George Clooney is fantastic in it. It's got the whole Salma Hayek as Santanico Pandemonium, which is one of the sexiest scenes ever put to celluloid. Yeah, right. I mean, just got hotter in here just thinking about it. And it's such a funny movie, but it's also legitimately like scary and action packed. And it's got great character moments like Harvey Keitel with his kids and all that stuff. I just think it's a pretty darn near perfect movie, and I really enjoy it. Yeah, and that's it. From Dusk Till Dawn, one of my favorites. That's my number 3.
Excellent. That was in my top 5 until earlier today. I was just, as I said, I've been going back and forth. But yeah, right. Everything you said, I wish I'd seen that film without knowing anything about it.
Oh, see, I did. I saw it like opening night in the theaters, and I
good.
thought I knew that it was a vampire movie, but then I was watching it and I was like, maybe it's not a vampire movie, and then it was like, oh, it is totally, Yeah. So that was a great experience.
I mean, the internet was around then, but it wasn't that big a thing. So back then, you could go see a film and not know much about it.
Yeah. Totally.
But that one in particular would have been so good to just go, oh, wow, this is a real good thriller. Oh, they're not very nice people. Oh, my God, what's going on? But yeah, I'm glad I made your list. Yeah, it's a good film. Yeah. My number 3 is another double whammy. I'm sorry about this, but because they're not similar, but they're both 80s vampire films, a bit of humor with them. They are Fright Night and The Lost Boys.
Okay.
Because I like them both because they're supernatural vampire horror, but with humor involved, mixed in. The Lost Boys, I went to see a screening of it. It was on the big screen the year before, with my friend Paul. And it was good seeing it again. I hadn't watched it in a few years. That was part of my growing up, that film. You have these films which you just seem to absorb and become part of it, part of your reference material. But I always liked it, the good cast, the whole idea of, there's vampires and the Frog Brothers, and the learning how to fight vampires by looking in the comic books, all that stuff. Some great scenes, and Fright Night as well. I like that, the guy moving in next door is a bit weird. Turns out he's a vampire. And you've got Roddy McDowall as the horror host who gets wrapped up in it. I love both of them. You always have to make a good double feature, but great performances. The vampire makeup is really good in both of them. Lots and lots of fun. Quite creepy and a few jump scares and things like that. But that's my number 3.
All right.
So there we go.
Okay, nicely done. All right. Well, my number 2, as I did think there could be some repetition. This is one of the ones I expected there to be on your list. Is The Lost Boys. And now, if I'm being honest, I might like From Dusk Till Dawn just a little bit better than The Lost Boys in terms of pure moviness. But the difference is that The Lost Boys is an iconic 80s movie. Dusk Till Dawn is not on all the t-shirts and lunchboxes and Funko Pops and all that stuff. The Lost Boys is, and there's a reason for that. It's the cast, with the Coreys, and Kiefer Sutherland and all of that. And it's the soundtrack with all those great songs. Music videos that I watched on MTV on endless repeat before I'd seen the film even, so it made me feel like I'd seen the film, and just like the poster, that classic Lost Boys poster with all the, all the characters in a row, like, it's just such an iconic film, like everybody knows The Lost Boys. And so like, because it's a movie that I do love and I do enjoy, and I do for the same reason, I like the humor in it as well as the, the vampire stuff. It edged out From Dusk Till Dawn just because I felt like it deserved a higher place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I love them both pretty equally, it's The Lost Boys. I don't know what else do I need to say, That's my number 2.
Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, right, right.
Good stuff. Okay,
Yeah.
well, my number two is it's from 2007, and it's 30 Days of Night,
Okay.
which is a film which I enjoy more each time I've watched it.
Hmm.
It's based on the comic by Steve Niles, and it's the one where it's an Alaskan town where they're reaching the time when the sun will set and it won't rise again for 30 days, hence the title. And lo and behold, some vampires go, "Oh, I've got an idea. Let's go there." But just from the beginning, I just like the whole sense of place and the way it's done, and it's a small community. And then there's the stranger comes in, played by Ben Foster, who's so good.
Yeah.
And then there's the old ship is just off the coast, and then just strange things happens, and it's got that fantastic scene which I love. It's the drone shot over the town, and you just see when it's the vampires finally attack, and it's just the vampire just going through and people running, and you see I love that the whole setup of it, the build up to this explosion of blood and death and violence, and how it ends as well is just brilliant and heartbreaking. But as I say, it's as time's gone on and I've revisited it, I enjoyed and appreciated all the more. But I just love the basic concept. I always liked that idea from the comic.
Yeah.
Just that, what a great idea, and how it'd never been done before.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I prefer the film more than the comic. But it's been years since I've read the comic. But yeah, that's my number two, 30 Days of Night.
All right. Well, you've been pretty good at stealing my thunder on this list. So you did it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. My number one is 30 Days of Night.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Absolutely love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. I've loved it since I saw it in theaters, like opening night. It's long been my favorite vampire movie since it came out in 2007, because it's just everything you said. It's brilliant. It's David Slade as the director. He actually went on to direct the Twilight movie, and it's my favorite of the Twilight movies. Not surprising.
Oh yeah, he did. Didn't he?
But yeah, he did do one.
I forgot about that.
And I see, I know stuff occasionally. But I really liked the comic. I read the comic before they made a movie out of it. I remember when the original 3-issue miniseries came out, it got a lot of buzz, but it was sold out.
Yeah.
So I got the trade paperback right when it came out, and I read it, and I was blown away by it. Actually, I do really like the comic book. I mean, not necessarily better than the movie, but I do love the comic. And so I was excited when the movie came out because I was a big fan of the comics, and then I watched the movie, and it was just so great. And everything you said about it, like that shot, the overhead shot is amazing. Just the characters are well done. The tension is like you could like bite your fingernails off. It's great. It's just perfect. It's a perfect vampire movie. There's not a single flaw in that film as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I just absolutely love it. And what I like about it is like enough people have seen it that you can talk about it with people, but there's still people out there to discover it. So like if you're one of those people who hasn't watched 30 Days a Night yet, like track it down. It's high on both our lists. It's number 1 and number 2. So it's it's really, really worth watching. It is utterly fantastic.
Excellent. Well, that's good. I'm glad it was on both the lists.
Yeah.
I had a feeling it might be.
So now, here's the thing. Obviously, I was wrong about both of these films being on your list. I will be shocked if one of the two films, and I did remember the other one, is not your number 1, though. So I'm curious to see which one I got it wrong on. But let's hear your number 1.
Okay, my number 1 is from 1992. It is Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I was wrong on both of them. I can't believe it.
Oh my God.
All right, we'll talk about Bram Stoker's first, and then I'll tell you what I thought you were going to have on your list. I can't believe I was so wrong, Phil.
It's the one that they might be on my short list. I wonder what they are. Yeah, but this is the one directed by Francis Ford Coppola, based on Dracula by Bram Stoker. It's kind of a big deal in the world of vampires. But it's Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, Anthony Hopkins hamming it up for all it's worth. Keanu Reeves doing an accent which may be British English.
Yeah, questionable.
But I've always liked this because I've always liked the story of Dracula, and I think this is one of the best iterations of it. I mean, it's changed some things with the whole. I've traveled 2 years, whatever the quote is anyway. But it's got brilliant performance by Gary Oldman as the Count, and the makeup. It's his film. He is, even when he's not there, his presence is in every frame, every moment in that film. It just looks gorgeous. The costumes, the sets, all the effects and the transitions as well. They tried to do as much as they could in camera, which is always great, which I always appreciate. but the makeup, the different looks of Dracula, from the old man to the dandy about town to the bat creature and the werewolf creature. Just it does the story so well. The changes that are made really add to it as well. There are some poor performances, but even watching it again, even Keanu Reeves' performance, it fits into the fact he's been stuck in this castle for God knows how long and had these gorgeous vampire women feasting on him and all this. But anyway, Winona Ryder, she's luminous, because it's Winona Ryder. But Gary Oldman, my God, if you wanted a definitive Dracula, he's pretty much it. I mean, people will argue because that's what people do on the internet. But anyway, that's my number one, Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992.
All right. Now,
and I would say one of the films Nosferatu.
No.
Okay, because I mentioned that one because on this year's Halloween, I'm going to go see. It's being shown in an open air thing with a person doing a live soundtrack. Yes, a live score on a piano. So that's
right. That's fun
with beers and things like that. So I'm looking forward to that.
All right. Well, I'll reveal those in a minute. First, let me just talk about Bram Stoker's Dracula for a moment. Because I have a weird sort of history with this film. Now, admittedly, I haven't seen it in a few years, but I do watch it every so often to sort of see where I'm at with it. I was sort of obsessed with this film when it came out, because, Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder, when it had this great cast. It was Francis Ford Coppola who, because I was in high school when this film came out, and as a young film buff, it was ooh, I was too young to have seen The Godfather and those movies and The Conversation in theaters and Apocalypse Now, but I knew what they all were, and I knew what a big deal Francis Ford Coppola was, and I was this is a new Francis Ford Coppola film, and then the whole thing with all the effects being filmed in camera and all that, I was just obsessed with the movie. I had 3 different Dracula t-shirts from the movie that were all really effective. One of them I still remember was really cool. It had the old man guy in the shadows, the old man version of Dracula. And I was obsessed with the idea of the movie more than the movie itself. And possibly because of being so obsessed with it, I was inevitably let down by it, disappointed by it. And as I've said on the show many times before, I used to fall very much victim to the hype and let myself get way too hyped up and then find myself disappointed more often than not. So I don't do that anymore. But that was one of those movies where that happened. But I've gone back to it a few times over the years, and I still find it's a good movie. I like it, but it's never captured me the way that it did for you, obviously. You know what I mean? It's never quite worked to the level I wanted to. I've never been able to get it to where I enjoy it as much as I wanted to enjoy it when I was in high school when it came out. You know what I mean?
Get that. Yeah, I know that. I've probably got films like that as well. But yeah.
So it's been 5-7 years since I've seen it, so it's probably time to rewatch it and see if I have a different appreciation for it, which I have found happening a lot lately, where I go back to movies I didn't like previously or didn't like as much, and now I enjoy them a lot more. So maybe this will be one of them, but it didn't make my list because of that, basically.
Fair enough. That makes total sense. Go on. What are the 2 films you thought were going to be on my list?
I was convinced Near Dark was going to be on there.
Oh no, I don't like Near Dark.
Oh, I thought you did.
No, I like the idea of Near Dark, and I always, every time I watch it, I go, yeah, I'm going to like it this time because I like the concept.
Yeah,
I like the fact, the cast as well. I mean, you got Lance Henriksen, Bill Paxton. You got a mini Aliens reunion going on.
Right.
The fact they're traveling around and all this stuff, but there's something about it which just doesn't quite. I mean, I like the scene in the bar as well, but I think it's the ending where they just get cured with spoilers, blood transfusion, and I'm always thinking, why didn't they just? Surely some of them must have thought, let's try that.
Right.
But anyway, there's something about it which just never sits right. It was one of those ones I didn't see it for a while, but I always heard good things about it, and then I tracked it down, going, yeah. Maybe with you, I had high expectations for it.
Right.
Like you did.
Same experience for me.
Then I watched it and went, oh, is that it?
Yeah.
Maybe a few years, like you, I watch it again and go, well, maybe this time.
Right.
I like them all, but then no.
All right. I had the same experience where I'd heard how good it was for years, and I knew it was Catherine Bigelow, and I think James Cameron produced it or something like that. And then it's got, like you said, the mini Aliens reunion in the cast, and I expected a lot, and I didn't love it. And I went back and watched it again a few years later, and I still don't love it. It's not terrible. I don't dislike it.
Yeah, not terrible. I can see why people like
it. Following. But for some reason, I thought for sure that was one of the ones that you loved. That's my mistake. Then I apologize.
Oh, no, that's okay. We do talk about lots of films.
We do. The other one I thought for sure would make it is What We Do in the Shadows.
That was on my short list.
I had a feeling that one I know you like, but so I can see why that maybe just didn't make the cut. That's fair. Anything else on your short list that you wanted to mention? I don't really have anything.
Well, there was Nosferatu. There was, I think we've mentioned them all between us.
Yeah. I do like to give out a nod to some that are to two vampire films that aren't great films, but I like them. I think I like them better than most people. One being John Carpenter's Vampires, which I think is an excellent film that I don't think, John Carpenter wasn't as peak by that point, but I actually really like it. And then here's the one that's no one ever, besides Twilight, is Dracula 2000, which I actually really like. And I know it got kind of
banned. Jared Butler one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy it, actually. I think it's a really fun, vampire film with a pretty young cast. It's like it's in that like Miramax Dimension Films like Scream. It was basically like they tried to make a Scream version of Dracula. But I really like it. I like the way it turned out. So that's one I mentioned. But
I remember enjoying that at the time. I liked it. They messed around with this. I liked it when you find out its true origin and things like that.
Yeah.
And
fun film.
When was the other one? Was I always enjoyed watching Vamp, the one with Grace Jones. A bunch of guys go to the strip joint. It turned out it's all the women there are vampires.
Right. I've never seen that one, actually. I've never watched it. So. All right, cool.
There's lots of other vampire films out there, but which ones are your favorites? When it's Halloween or around about this time, which vampire movie is your go-to horror movie?
Exactly.
Let us know in the comments wherever you're watching or listening to this, because we always appreciate your feedback. And who knows, it might be a film that we've not seen or want to revisit. I'm so glad you mentioned Stakeland. I'm gonna have to track that down and rewatch that.
Sure. I'm glad I was able to refresh your memory on it.
Good stuff.
All right. Okay. Yes, indeed. I enjoyed that. All right. So that's our top 5 vampire movies. So some overlap, some differences. That worked out well, I think. And now that brings us to our final section of the show, which is ATE Recommends. What are you and I enjoying right now, Phil? Now, I will admit, and I can go first or you can go first, doesn't matter, but I will admit I at the very last minute, I went, I should have found something horror themed to keep with our Halloween extravaganza. And I didn't. So I suck. Just in case you did, I'm going to let people down. So do you have something horror themed, or are you on a different track?
I've got 2 books, and one of them is horror themed.
All right. Well, why don't I go first then, and then you can finish up and make your last pick the horror book, so that way we have a nice, we keep the horror theme intact. How does that sound?
Makes sense, yeah.
All right. So I'll go first then. Let me do this for the view for those people who are watching. So my recommendation this week is the Uncanny X-Men. The Uncanny X-Men trading cards, the complete series. Now, fans of a certain age will remember back in the early 90s, there was an X-Men trading card series in which the entire 100-card set featured artwork by none other than Jim Lee, who is, of course, my favorite all-time comic book artist and the greatest comic book artist ever, in my opinion. And so it was a very, very popular series of trading cards. It was hugely successful. So they sold millions of them. And this has been a trend. I've got a bunch of these books this company has been putting out, Abrams Arts. And so it's a smaller book, but what they do is it reprints every single card in the set, slightly bigger than trading card sized. And it includes the front and the back. And the artwork is beautiful. It also comes with 4 exclusive cards that just fell out. Super excited about that. 4 exclusive cards that takes his X-Men #1 4 connecting covers and connects them as trading cards. And they're exclusive to this book because they were not part of the original set. And what I liked about this one, now I've gotten a few of these books from some of the various ones they've done. They did them for like the Star Wars movies and like Planet of the Apes and like Mars Attacks. And I've gotten most of them because I really like those trading card sets, but I don't really have place for trading cards much anymore. So I like the books because I can put them on my bookshelf. And a lot of times it's like usually, a couple pages of an intro and then all the cards. And this one, the like sort of history of the cards, the text at the beginning of the book is about 50 pages, actually. Like, it's a pretty sizable, I mean, the amount of actual text is probably closer to like 25 pages or so, but like it's got like a really in-depth introduction talking about like the history of the cards. It has pictures of like prototypes and like how the coloring was done and some of the packaging and like some what the wrappers look like, some of the advertisements for them. It's a really nice kind of in-depth kind of history of the cards. And then on some of the cards in the book, They have little like it's hard to see here, but they have little
Yeah,
like tidbits about the cards that are added from like the people who worked on the cards. Not Jim Lee, unfortunately, but it is nice to kind of little commentary, not on every card, but on a lot more of them than I've seen in some of the previous books. So I felt like, in addition to the pretty pictures, this was probably the most informative of all of the trading card books that are in this format that I've gotten so far, which is pretty much all of them. So if you're an X-Men fan or a Jim Lee fan, which everybody should be a Jim Lee fan, this is an awesome, beautiful book that I highly recommend.
excellent. It's always nice.
It has nothing to do with Halloween. Sorry about that.
It's always good having a bunch of good artwork in a book. I like the sound of that. Before do you have just the one thing, yeah?
Yeah.
Before we go on, there was actually a comment which didn't seem to show up on our StreamYard comment section, but it's on. I've got the Facebook page open as well.
Oh, great!
But it's a comment from Richard Brown, and he says, like a vampire in a mirror, I didn't see that coming. Apologies, been waiting to drop that in. But he loves so many of the films you mentioned. Honorable mentions to What We Do in the Shadows, hilarious but still effective send-up, and Let the Right One In, yeah, from 2008.
No,
very differently paced and toned and beautifully
I
shot.
cannot accept that. Sorry, Richard. We will not be discussing Let the Right One In on my show. It's my show when it comes to Let the Right One In. All the rest of the time, it's our show, Phil. But when it comes to Let the Right One In, it is my show, and we will not be discussing it. Although the new TV show is fantastic. I interviewed the cast at New York Comic Con.
Yeah.
I loved the show, but the original movie is no. Sorry, no.
Oh, I've not seen. I don't mind the original movie. I think it's better than the American remake, but I've not seen a TV show yet. But you can see you can listen to Mike's interview on Live for Films, so it's worth checking that out.
Yes.
Good
but
stuff.
Thank you for your comments, Richard. I do appreciate that, even if you're wrong about Let the Right One In.
And I just wonder why
the filmmakers let the wrong one in. I'm sorry.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, it's my recommendations then.
Yes, please. Let's hear them.
We'll zoom in. And my first one is a book. Well, they're both books, but this one is well documented. The essential documentaries that prove that truth is more fascinating than fiction by Ian Hayden Smith.
Oh, wow.
There it is. It's by, what's the name of it? White Line Publishing. It's out now to buy, but it's a collection of films by international directors that have been astounding viewers for the last 100 years, delving deep into how these films were made, why you should see them, and what you should watch next. And it covers lots and lots. This is it's split into different sections: people and places, politics, society, history, conflict, science and nature, crimes and injustice, short films. But it's those of you watching, there's just lots and lots of films involved. But it basically breaks them down. It's like a page on each one. You have these big splash pages as well. So you can just dip in and out as well. It's perfect for that.
It looks nice
artwork. Lots of films I've seen, but then also lots of films which I haven't seen. Quite a few I've not even heard of.
Oh wow!
Lots of artwork. It gives you a little bit of information about the films, stuff that's Life on Earth, which is
very cool.
Stuff like that. But it's a great one. It's not too expensive either, and it's just, as I say, you can just dive into it whenever you want and just have a read about it. And you could, I think, every one in there, like it mentions some of the classics, Man on Wire, Touching the Void, things like that. But yeah, well documented.
Very cool.
£20 and 30 of your American dollars.
All right.
And the other one is, I mentioned it after the ending, it's Omnibus 1 of the comic Harrow County.
Right.
By Cullen Bunn and Tyler Cook. And it's all about this young girl who lives in Harrow County, and then she starts finding out where she came from and the strange goings on. And it gets dark, it's twisted, but the artwork and the way it's written, it's also comforting and gorgeous and lovely. The artwork is just, I find, stunning. It's all like a proper Americana, small town, cornfields, but then the dark woods. And it's got some great creatures, like there's the skinless kid who's, you're going, oh my God, but then you go, when something could happen to them, you're going, oh no, don't hurt them. It's,
right.
Various ghosties and things like that. But it's
hold that up again.
Pardon?
Hold that up again.
Hold it up again. Yeah, it's
you're way too fast.
Yes, there we go.
Very cool.
But I just want to find a good one of the kids' faces as well, because it's just
You know, it's funny because it's rare that you make a comic book suggestion that I have not read, but I have not. I'm familiar with Harrow County. I know it's popular. And who's the writer again? You said it was it Zeb Wells or
Cullen Bunn and
Cullen
Tyler
Bunn,
Croft.
who
Yeah.
I do like. But I don't. I haven't had a lot of success with horror comics in general. They're not. It's not my favorite genre of comics. Yep.
Oh,
So
there you go.
so I haven't dove into it, but I know that people do really like it, so that's very cool. But that's not one I can comment on because I haven't seen it.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah,
it's really the artwork. It's like I think it's painted. It looks like some of it looks
Yeah,
like
it does look
watercolors
like
as
it.
well. It's got a real good style to it. And I know it's a horror comic, but it's also, I mean, there are some bits where I went, ugh. But on
Right.
the whole, even then, it's one of those ones where it's it just feels something nice about it as well, even though it covers dark things. And the main character, Emmy, it's really good. But it's when she finds out she's connected to the dark creatures, which are called haints in it. But this collects issues 1 to 16. I want to get the second omnibus because then I think that contains the whole story. Then I think there's been offshoots, but it was the guys on the YouTube channel Imperious Rex. They were talking about it in one of their Halloween specials, and so I got picked this up quite cheap because I think it's been out for a little while.
Yeah, that's been around for a while for sure.
Yeah, so it's but it's worth checking out. Harrow County.
Okay, very good.
It's a Dark Horse as well. Dark Horse comic.
There you go. So we ended on a horror note, which I appreciate because I felt silly for not having good horror recommendations. I appreciate you carrying the flag there, Phil, and keeping us, accountable for what we try to do on the show here. So thank you for that.
One more mention as well. We've got another comment again. It's not showing up.
Oh yeah, I don't know why they're not showing up tonight, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's Richard Brown, and once again, and he says, and I totally agree with him because this is fantastic. An honourable mention to a slightly older UK TV series called Ultraviolet.
Oh yeah,
1998, which stars a young Idris Elba and a few other familiar faces. But that's great. It's got this cool technology and carbon bullets. And there's an episode of Idris Elba trapped in this warehouse with these coffins on timers, which will open up and vampires will come out. And he's got to get out. But it's, Ultraviolet. Track that down. That's a good watch.
Yeah, very cool.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. That's a good one.
Yes, thank you, Richard. Appreciate your comments as always. All right, so there you go. That is our annual Halloween extravaganza, which is really just a regular episode, but there's nothing extra or vaganza about it, really, except for the fact that it's Halloween themed. But it's okay. We like it. We like to have fun with it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And if you're listening to this or watching this before Halloween, have a happy Halloween. If you're listening or watching it after Halloween, we hope you had a great Halloween. Now we covered all of our bases, right?
Yeah, and there's always another Halloween next year.
That's right. If you're listening to this like in, say, December, just think of it as early prep for next October. So if you're like, one who likes to watch 30 Halloween movies or, 31 Halloween movies in the month of October, like you can dig in and be ready and have your list and all that stuff. So there we go.
There you go, yeah. But let us know your favorite horror films to be watching or any cool horror TV shows that they like, because it's always good. And as we cover comics as well now and again, let us know your horror comics and see if we can creep out Mike.
It doesn't take a lot, let's be honest. All right, well, that is going to do us for tonight. But as always, we thank you greatly for listening, and we wish everybody a happy Halloween, no matter what time of year it is, because Halloween, I think, for some people is a state of mind and not a time of year. So enjoy those spooky goings-on. But until next time, I'm Mike Spring.
And I'm Phil Edwards.
And we'll see you next time.
After the ending.